I think there's so many fucking powerful people that are on those lists. There's so many powerful people that went and partied. Air quotes, partied. And how many of them went to the Diddy parties? Have you been paying attention to the trial?
Oh, yeah.
Trials.
To ask questions like, were their decisions colored by certain things, and who got the benefit of the doubt, in that courtroom?
Do you think that hip-hop culture was on trial as much as Sean Combs was?
Look, if I didn't say anything, you would interpret it as hip-hop is fine with his behaviors. There's no one else being vocal. So you would look at it and just say, because that mind your business, or let me not say nothing about nothing, or those things, it would allow the entire culture to register as if they're for that behavior.
The internet didn't just raise an eyebrow when 50 Cent and Joe Rogan started talking. It leaned back, locked the door, and turned the volume up. Because when those two start circling the same conversation, it never ends politely. It ends with careers sweating and comment sections catching fire. According to online chatter, this wasn't a casual podcast moment or a throwaway joke. This felt like one of those conversations where people speak just carefully enough to avoid names, but just recklessly enough to make everyone nervous. The kind of talk that sounds like a warning disguised as entertainment. The kind that makes Hollywood smile publicly and panic privately. Joe Rogan, known for asking questions that make rooms uncomfortable, and 50 Cent, known for treating controversy like a sport, suddenly sounded aligned. Not friendly, not playful, focused. And that's when the internet decided something ugly was bubbling under the surface. People started saying this made celebrity scandals from the past look like warm-up rounds. That even the biggest expos as we've already seen might have just been trailers. Because when insiders stop laughing and start hinting, it usually means the mess is deeper than anyone wants to admit. And the scariest part, nobody denied it. That's when curiosity turned into suspicion. Suspicion turned into obsession. And the question everyone started whispering was simple and terrifying at the same time. It didn't sound like a rant. That's what made it dangerous. According to online chatter, when Joe Rogan and 50 Cent started circling the same topic, it wasn't loud. It was deliberate. No yelling. No wild accusations. Just a tone that felt like people who've seen the backstage lights flicker and decided to mention it without pointing fingers. The kind of conversation that makes everyone listening sit up straighter. Joe Rogan has built an empire on asking questions that make rooms uncomfortable. He doesn't accuse, he invites. He lets people talk long enough to expose themselves. And 50 Cent, he doesn't whisper. He laughs at chaos, weaponizes sarcasm, and treats controversy like chess instead of checkers. So when those two sounded aligned, the internet didn't hear entertainment. It heard a warning siren with a podcast mic. According to viewers, the conversation wasn't about one scandal. It was about a system, a pattern, a culture that rewards silence until it doesn't. They spoke like people who've watched stories get buried, rebranded, and monetized until nobody remembers what actually happened. Not naming names, but painting out lines sharp enough for anyone paying attention to recognize shapes. The sarcasm was subtle but lethal. Jokes landed with that uncomfortable laugh you make when something hits too close. People online said it felt like watching two surgeons joke during an operation, casual on the surface, deadly serious underneath. The humor wasn't there to entertain. It was there to soften the impact of what they were implying. Joe leaned into the idea that celebrity culture doesn't just create fame, it creates insulation. A bubble where consequences move slower and accountability needs a calendar invite. According to online interpretations, he framed it as an ecosystem that protects itself until it can't anymore. And when that protection cracks, it doesn't crack quietly. 50 Cent didn't disagree. He smirked through it, the way someone does when they've already seen the ending. He spoke like a man who's watched careers implode not because of one mistake, but because years of tolerated behavior finally got receipts. The tone wasn't shocked. It was familiar. That's when the internet started buzzing. People weren't quoting full sentences. They were clipping phrases, pauses, reactions. That's how you know something landed. When viewers start analyzing what wasn't said instead of what was, The subtext has officially taken over. Comment sections turned into decoding labs overnight. The conversation quickly got framed as a contrast. On one side, curated celebrity personas polished within an inch of their lives. On the other, whispers of behavior that never makes it past NDAs and closed doors. Joe talked about how fame doesn't change people, it just removes friction. 50 added that money doesn't buy morality, it buys time. That line hit harder than any accusation. According to online reactions, people started connecting dots instantly, not because names were mentioned, but because the industry already has a greatest hits playlist of suspicious silence. The internet doesn't need details to speculate. It just needs permission to think out loud. Sarcasm online exploded. Memes popped up comparing Hollywood to a luxury haunted house where everyone knows something's wrong but keeps buying tickets. Others joked that this made reality TV look like daycare. The humor was exaggerated, but the unease was real. People weren't laughing because it was funny. They were laughing because it felt familiar. Joe's role in this phase was the instigator, not the exposer, but the flashlight holder. He asked questions about power dynamics, gatekeeping, and why certain stories never seemed to reach daylight. According to listeners, he spoke less like a commentator and more like someone mapping a problem he's been circling for years. 50 Cent played the counterbalance. Where Joe questioned, 50 hinted. Where Joe paused, 50 smirked. He didn't present himself as a moral authority. He presented himself as a survivor of an industry that eats people and pretends it's a buffet. That credibility matters online, especially when it comes wrapped in humor. The internet immediately split into camps. One side praised them for finally saying it. The other accused them of vague fear-mongering without accountability. Both sides kept watching. That's the key. Outrage didn't shut the conversation down. It amplified it. People began resurfacing old interviews, old moments, old awkward clips where celebrities dodged questions a little too hard. Suddenly, those moments felt different. The internet loves hindsight. It turns awkward pauses into evidence and jokes into warnings. What made this phase escalate was the timing. Celebrity culture was already in a trust deficit. Audiences were tired of apologies that sounded like legal documents and explanations that explained nothing. So when two high-profile voices hinted at a deeper rot, it didn't feel random. It felt overdue. Joe spoke about how audiences are complicit too. How fans reward chaos until chaos gets ugly. That part stung. According to online chatter, people didn't like being included in the critique. It's easier to point at celebrities than to admit the machine runs on attention from everyone watching. 50 didn't let that sit comfortably. He joked that the industry loves pretending surprise when consequences show up, like it hasn't been arfed for years. The sarcasm landed because it felt accurate, not cruel. Just observant. By the end of this phase, the conversation had shifted from curiosity to anticipation. People weren't asking if something was coming. They were asking when. The idea that more revelations might surface started circulating like a countdown. Nobody could see. No names were dropped. No allegations made. And yet, the implication was heavier than specifics. Because when insiders talk about systems instead of individuals, it suggests the problem is bigger than any single headline. Once that conversation landed, the internet didn't wait for confirmation. It went straight into analysis mode like it had just been handed a puzzle with missing pieces and unlimited caffeine. Clips were slowed down. Quotes were isolated. Pauses were treated like confessions. People weren't listening to what Joe Rogan and 50 Cent said anymore. They were listening to what they didn't say. That's when the speculation machine hit full throttle. Timelines filled with threads connecting dots that may or may not exist, but sounded convincing enough to argue about. Users started listing names like it was a fantasy draft nobody wanted to win. Comment sections turned into amateur investigation rooms where everyone was suddenly an expert in industry patterns and power dynamics. Memes followed. Because the internet always laughs when it's uncomfortable. People joked that Hollywood was acting like a group chat where someone just typed, "We need to talk," and went silent. Others compared the situation to a horror movie where the background characters realized they're not safe anymore. The jokes were wild, but the tension underneath them was real. Celebrity reactions didn't come as denials. They came as vibes. Subtle posts about accountability, healing, and not everything online being true started appearing like clockwork. Nobody addressed Joe or 50 directly, but nobody needed to. The timing was loud. When vague statements appear right after a controversial conversation, the internet treats them like defensive smoke signals. Joe Rogan's role in this phase became clearer to viewers. He wasn't positioning himself as a whistleblower. He was positioning himself as someone holding up a mirror and asking why everyone keeps pretending they don't see what's reflected. According to online reactions, that approach felt more unsettling than accusations ever could. 50 Cent leaned into the chaos the way only he can. Sarcastic comments, smirks, that energy of someone who's entertained but not surprised. People online said it felt like watching someone who already read the ending pretending not to spoil it. That's a dangerous posture in celebrity culture, because it invites people to imagine the worst. The phrase dark side of celebrity culture started getting used like a catch-all explanation. Every old rumor, every past scandal, every unexplained silence got folded into it. The internet didn't need new information. It recontextualized old information with a new lens and called it revelation. That's when the outrage grew teeth. Some viewers accused Joe and 50 of irresponsibility. They argued that vague warnings without names create panic and encourage baseless speculation. Others fired back that the vagueness was the point. That naming names isn't how systems get exposed. It's how messengers get silenced. The debate didn't cool anything down. It fueled it. Pop culture comparisons got outrageous. People said this made past celebrity expos look like warm-up rounds. Others joked that even the biggest scandals we've already seen might have just been trailers. Exaggeration became the language of the moment because subtlety couldn't survive the algorithm. Reaction channels went live non-stop. Influencers leaned into serious tones, promising context while delivering opinions. Some treated the situation like a breaking news event. Others framed it like a psychological thriller. Different packaging, same outcome. More engagement, more noise. What made this phase explosive was how personal it felt to viewers. Joe's commentary about audience complicity struck a nerve. People don't like being told they're part of the machine they criticize. That discomfort turned into defensiveness, and defensiveness turned into louder opinions. Meanwhile, 50 Cent's humor cut through the tension like a blade wrapped in jokes. He didn't preach. He observed. He implied that the industry doesn't collapse from one revelation. It erodes from repeated tolerance. That idea stuck because it felt familiar. Old interviews started resurfacing again. Awkward laughs, dodged questions. Clips that once felt harmless now felt suspicious under the new framing. The internet loves rewatching the past with fresh paranoia. It turns coincidence into patterns and patterns into narratives. Industry silence became impossible to ignore. No coordinated pushback. No collective dismissal. Just quiet. That quiet didn't calm anyone down. It did the opposite. In celebrity culture, silence is rarely accidental. It's strategic, and strategy implies risk. People begin speculating about private conversations happening behind the scenes. Emergency PR calls. Crisis planning. Quiet warnings passed around in circles that don't include the public. Whether real or imagined, those assumptions added weight to the story. This didn't feel like a moment. It felt like a shift. Joe Rogan didn't walk anything back. That mattered. There was no clarification tweet. No taken out of context explanation. The conversation was left to stand on its own, which told the internet everything it needed to know. If it was nothing, it would have been corrected. 50 Cent didn't either. He let the jokes sit, let the reactions cook, let the internet spiral. That silence felt intentional, like watching a storm from a safe distance and letting everyone else decide how serious it was. By this point, the story wasn't about specific allegations. It was about trust, or the lack of it. Audiences started questioning how much of celebrity culture is curated performance and how much is carefully managed silence. The outrage didn't explode all at once. It simmered. Long threads replaced quick jokes. Analysis replaced memes. That shift signaled maturity in the chaos, which is far more dangerous than initial shock. When people start thinking instead of reacting, narratives get sharper. This phase didn't end with answers. It ended with anticipation. People weren't asking who would be exposed. They were asking who would speak next. Because once a conversation like this enters public consciousness, it doesn't disappear. It waits. And the waiting is always worse than the reveal. Because when hints start sounding like warnings, the fallout doesn't come from the speakers. When the dust settled, it didn't settle evenly. It clung. This is the phase where nothing officially happens, but everything quietly changes. No names get dropped. No charges appear. No documentaries roll out with dramatic trailers. And yet, the temperature in celebrity culture shifts like someone adjusted the thermostat without telling anyone. Public perception didn't explode. It recalibrated. People started watching interviews differently. Smiles looked rehearsed. Apologies sounded pre-written. Every no comment felt heavier than it used to. When trust cracks, even slightly, it changes how audiences interpret everything that follows. Joe Rogan's comments lingered like a background hum. Not loud enough to dominate every conversation, but constant enough to be felt. Viewers didn't need him to repeat anything. The idea had already taken root. Systems protect themselves. Silence is often purchased. Consequences arrive late. If they arrive at all, 50 Cent's presence kept the mood from going fully grim. But that didn't mean it was playful. His humor carried the weight of experience. The kind that says, "I've seen this before," without needing to explain when or where. That credibility mattered. Not because he accused anyone, but because he didn't sound surprised. Industry behavior shifted in subtle ways. Invitations felt more curated. Collaborations looked more cautious. Public alignment became selective. Brands leaned into safe messaging, like they were walking on freshly cracked ice and hoping it wouldn't give way. When an industry senses risk, it doesn't panic publicly. It hedges quietly. Fans notice the difference. Comment sections turned skeptical. Praise came with qualifiers. Support sounded conditional. The internet doesn't revoke loyalty overnight. It renegotiates it. That renegotiation showed up everywhere. From interviews to award speeches to the way headlines were written, old stories resurfaced again, not as accusations, but as questions. Moments that once passed without friction now drew side eyes. People didn't say, "This proves it." They said, "This feels familiar." Familiarity is dangerous, because it doesn't need proof to stick. The absence of direct fallout didn't calm anyone down. It made the conversation more ominous. When nothing happens after a warning, people assume something is being handled privately. That assumption alone feeds distrust. Transparency loses to imagination every time. Joe Rogan didn't escalate. He didn't clarify. He didn't apologize. He let the idea exist as it was introduced. That restraint gave the conversation weight. If it were empty, it would have been walked back. If it were reckless, it would have been reframed. Neither happened. 50 Cent did what he does best. He stayed unpredictable. Jokes here, silence there. A reminder that some people navigate controversy like a familiar neighborhood. That comfort unsettled viewers more than outrage would have. Comfort implies knowledge. Knowledge implies history. What followed wasn't exposure. It was anticipation. Audiences started treating celebrity culture like a house with too many locked doors. Not assuming what's behind them, but acknowledging they exist. That awareness changes consumption. People still watch. They just believe less. The conversation shifted from who did what to why does this keep happening. Systems became the villain instead of individuals. Gatekeeping, NDAs, power, dynamics, access. The machinery that keeps messes quiet until they become unmanageable. That framing is harder to dismiss because it doesn't rely on a single story. Some critics accused Joe and 50 of irresponsibility, of lighting a match and walking away. Others argued that calling attention to systems without naming names is the only way to survive them. Both arguments lived side by side, and neither killed the conversation. What made this phase stick was how it bled into unrelated moments. A celebrity apology dropped, and people referenced the conversation. A scandal broke, and someone asked if this was part of the same rot. A podcast clip went viral, and viewers searched for subtext that might not exist. That's influence without accusation. The industry didn't collapse. Careers didn't vanish overnight, but the sheen dulled. The illusion of invincibility cracked just enough for doubt to slip in. And once doubt arrives, it doesn't leave quietly. Joe Rogan's audience took the message as permission to question, not to accuse, but to stop swallowing narratives whole. 50 Cent's audience took it as confirmation that chaos isn't random, it's tolerated until it's inconvenient. Different takeaways, same destination. The most uncomfortable realization was collective. Fans realized they'd been part of the cycle, rewarding chaos, ignoring warning signs, treating rumors as entertainment until entertainment got ugly. That self-awareness didn't spark apologies. It sparked defensiveness. And defensiveness keeps conversations alive. As weeks passed, the topic didn't trend, but it didn't die. It became a reference point, a shorthand, a reminder. People would say, after that Rogan and 50 conversation, like it marked a before and after. Not in history books, but in mindset. That's the real aftermath. Not names exposed, not secrets spilled, but a cultural shift where fewer people accept the surface story as the whole story, where silence is questioned instead of ignored, where power dynamics get discussed instead of dismissed. And that's why this wasn't a moment. It was a signal. Signals don't demand attention. They wait for it. The next scandal will arrive. It always does. New faces, new headlines, new outrage. But when it does, people will remember this conversation. They'll listen differently, watch closer, trust less. Because once the idea of a system enters public consciousness, it never fully leaves. And this is exactly how the curtain gets pulled back without anyone actually touching it. No names dropped, no documents leaked. Just two voices saying enough to make the entire industry sit up a little straighter. When insiders stop joking and start hinting, it's never random. It's a warning shot dressed up as conversation. If this breakdown made you rethink how you watch celebrity culture, then the message landed. The internet doesn't expose things overnight. It soft launches the truth and lets the audience connect the dots. And once those dots are connected, you can't unsee the picture. So go ahead and smash that like button like it owes you money and just try to dodge the bill. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation is far from finished and the comment section is where the real debates happen. Subscribe if you're tired of surface-level takes and want the stories behind the smiles, the silence, and the carefully managed narratives. This channel doesn't chase gossip, we dissect patterns. We talk about what's said, what's avoided, and why certain stories always seem to stop short. New scandals, new reactions, and new uncomfortable truths drop constantly here. And remember, today's hint becomes tomorrow's headline. Today's silence becomes next month's explanation. The industry doesn't collapse in one day. It cracks over time. Stay locked in. Welcome to Truth Tattle, where the whispers matter, the patterns speak louder, and the truth never stays buried for long.